Hello and welcome to the Retro Odyssey podcast. I'm your host, Steven, with my co-host, Matt. How's it been, Matt?
Not too bad, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing all right. It's our busy season, and it's also kind of birthday season for my family. We've got a few of us with birthdays in March. Um, so lots of work and a little bit of fun over here so far.
Yeah, awesome. I am currently enjoying a week off work. Um, as of the time of recording, I'm going to be going to a concert in London tomorrow. Um, Distant Worlds playing Final Fantasy music.
I know we've talked about this off podcast. I don't know if we've talked about it on the podcast. But I am immensely jealous that you're able to go to distant worlds.
Yeah, it's going to be it's going to have a focus on 14 and 16 this time around.
Mm-hmm.
So it plays music from all across the series, but there's kind of like a focus on like more of a heavy focus on 14, 16. Like the last time that they toured, there was more of a focus on 7 because the remake of that had come out.
Right.
But yeah, 14, 16 this time around. Soken is going to be there, the composer of both of those games, and Amanda Akin, who sings for both of those games, will be there as well.
That's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
I sincerely hope that the next time they come over here, I'll be able to go.
Yeah, I think they did a few dates in America, but I'm not entirely sure where.
I mean, I think the last time I checked, they were up in like New York and stuff. But I wouldn't have been able to afford it anyway. So hopefully next time.
Yeah, they're not like touring the UK, but they're doing 3 concerts in the same venue.
Right.
So there's 1 today, and there's 2 tomorrow. They have like a matinee and the evening one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you just happen to live close enough that it's the ticket is the main expense.
Yeah, the train fare came close.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, the ticket was about 100. The train fare is like 83.
Oh, okay. I thought you were closer than that.
About 2.5 hours away from London.
Oh, okay.
But yeah. Looking forward to that. But what have you been playing this month?
I have been playing a lot of games. Basically, whenever I have had free time from my tax jobs, I've been playing games. I've still been playing a lot of Pokemon. I'm very excited for Pokemon Legends ZA, which is going to be coming out later this year. And to that end, I've been playing Pokemon Legends Arceus again and Pokemon Y because I've played X before. I never went through Y. And the new game is going to be set in the same region as X and Y. So I want to go back and get more familiar with that region. Outside of that, I've played a few other Pokemon games. I booted up Pokemon Snap a couple of times. I've been playing the new Pokemon Snap, which is a whole lot of fun. That's a really good game. I'm still mad it took that long to get one. And let's see what else. Oh, so the new Monster Hunter came out, and Monster Hunter is a series that I've had a weird history with. I love the concept, but I've always bounced off of the games. So instead of playing the new one when it came out and paying $70, I picked up Monster Hunter World, which came out in like 2016, I think. And I played that because that's supposed to be one of the most friendly to newcomers entries. And I can say after playing that for 9-10 hours, I finally get it. I just had to get far enough into the game to get to the good bits.
Yeah, people have said that about the new one as well. Kind of like getting to end game is the tutorial. and then opens up and gets good.
Yeah, and that's like every other time I played like 2 or 3 sessions, and then I would just forget about it or get bored. And what was happening was I was going through all the tutorial stuff every time to basically refresh myself, and I was never getting to the actual main gameplay loop. I was only in the tutorial stuff where you only have access to a quarter of the mechanics. So now that I've actually gotten into the game proper, yes, I get it. You know, it turns out this is a series that I can really enjoy. I just have to get through the tutorial section. I picked up the sequel to one of the games that we're going to talk about, but I didn't start it. Just because playing through that game kind of got me wanting to check out the sequel. So I've got access to it now. I just haven't started it, but that'll probably be sometime this year. Um, and then I think the last thing was just last week. I picked up the Mega Man X Legacy Collections on Xbox,
Yeah, they
as
went
well
on
as
sale, didn't they?
yeah, they were like 60% off. And then I saw they were also 60% off on Switch. And I was like, I could have got them on Switch. But yeah, so I picked up all of those because, as you know, as we've stated many times on the podcast, I love the Mega Man X series. Um, Over the past couple of days, I've played through 90% of X4, since that's my favorite of the bunch. But yeah, I've kind of been all over the place, but still. I also played a little bit of Fire Emblem, just because as tends to happen, I got the hankering for some Fire Emblem and played that for a couple of weeks and then stopped. But what have you been playing? How's Good Wars 2?
Um, Guild Wars 2 is great. It's just had a new patch a few weeks ago, so I've been playing through that. Done all the story content, new zone, and everything. So yeah, really, really been enjoying that. Um, I've been playing quite a lot this month as well. Final Fantasy 14 just had a patch come out 2 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
I have gone through the MSQ, but I've not done a new raid yet. Yeah, it's decent. I was kind of the first 40 minutes of the MSQ I found really boring, but then it kicked up a notch, and got really interesting after that. But one thing that 14 does a lot is have you walk around escorting people,
Yeah.
and with a lot of talking, and it can get a bit dull if you're not super invested in the characters that you're escorting.
Mm.
But it was fine. Had really cool new trial with really cool music, and yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into the raid. I've heard the raid is really really good. This is like wing two of the raid that was in the launch game.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, looking forward to that. Um, I have also started playing the master levels for Doom 2. So this is an official add-on that came out not long after Doom 2,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just got like a new episode with a bunch of new levels, and I've never really got into it. So I decided to check that out. The levels are decent, quite hard, but nothing I'm having like a major issue with. The only problem I had is that I like died halfway through the fifth level, and then I realized that I hadn't saved since the start of the fourth.
Whoops.
So, so yeah, I've got to go through all that again, which is a bit annoying. But yeah, I'm enjoying that so far. The major thing that I've been playing over the past month, well over the past 2 months, I finally got Final Fantasy 16. So with me going to this concert, which is going to be playing some of the music from the game, I wanted to kind of like play through and, check out the music, stuff like that. So I borrowed a copy off a friend, and about 2 hours in, I decided I want to buy my own copy. So I went down to the shop, got my own copy. And I went through the whole game, 60 hours, and I've actually gone through it again. So I've played through it completely twice, mainly because there's an achievement where if you max out all of your abilities, you get an achievement for it. You can't do it on kind of like a first playthrough. You've got to go through New Game Plus to get enough points to do it. So I decided to go through again. That is a fantastic game. It's probably tied with 10 for my favorite single player Final Fantasy game. I love the combat in it. The music, the story is fantastic. The combat was made by one of the guys from Devil May Cry, the guy who like designed the combat in that, so it plays a lot like Devil May Cry in terms of combat. And yeah, it is just fantastic. Everything about that game is really, really good. It's a misery simulator. You are in a world that hates you, like the world hates magic users and essentially enslaves them. And yeah, there's a lot of really, really bad shit that goes on in that game, but it is excellent. It really is, and I love it.
I'm very glad to hear that. Obviously I haven't been able to play it since I don't have a PS5, but I know that there was a little bit of controversy with it just because of some of the comments that have been made, and then of course there's a lot of people that don't like the direction the modern games have gone in terms of getting more action focused instead of turn based. But I'm very glad to hear that you enjoyed it. That's high praise that you played through it twice in the span of a couple of months.
Yeah, like I said, first time around is 60 hours, so there's like massive amounts of content there. That is doing every side quest, every hunt mission. Yeah, just kind of like doing everything. So definitely a very, very meaty game. My original plan was to buy a PS5 for that when it came out, but I couldn't really afford it at the time, and PS5s were still a little bit hard to get. So I ended up waiting until Silent Hill 2 came out and buying one for that.
Mm-hmm.
But absolutely glad I played it. And if you ever do get a PS5, well, it's on PC as well, so you can play it on PC.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely check that out. And I should point out as well, I played it on. There are kind of like several different difficulties. If you play it on what is called story-focused difficulties, you get a couple of trinkets which you can equip, which allow you to do kind of like complex combos, just kind of like mashing the one button. And it will also auto dodge attacks that can be dodged. It doesn't completely automate everything. Like there is some stuff that you will still need to move out of, and there are some decisions in combat which you will need to make yourself. But that greatly enhanced like my enjoyment of the game as well. Being able to go through and not have to worry about switching powers and the right attack to use and manually dodging out of everything. I think I would have struggled with that. But having those trinkets on, I wish that they weren't trinkets that you equipped, because you only have 3 trinket slots. So if you equip those 2 story mode trinkets, you can only attach one other. And there are a lot of interesting trinkets that do a lot of different things.
Mm.
So you are kind of like limited to only being able to pick one if you want to use those story mode trinkets. But it was fine. It was fine. I got through it.
Yeah, and I mean, I may get us canceled here, but I heartily approve of story mode difficulties in games. That's one of my favorite things about Stranger of Paradise is that it has difficulty modes because I enjoy Souls likes the concept. I love Final Fantasy, but that game would be miserable if it was just you know bastard hard all the time.
Mm.
So I always approve of difficulty modes or items that make things easier. That is fantastic. Love it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's always good to have that option there. And I do try and, especially if it's going to be a really, really long game,
Hmm.
it just makes me stick with the game. Whereas I have tried the combat without those trinkets, and I'm not sure if I would have been able to stick with it
Hmm.
otherwise. But yeah, 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 it's really good. That's everything that I've been playing this month generally. But I do have one other thing that's kind of like relevant that I want to talk about. So
Hmm.
I'm looking this summer to get a new PC because this one is kind of like a bit long in the tooth. It's struggling with a lot of newer stuff like that. So I had the idea when I do get this new PC, I'm going to move this current one downstairs, connected to my TV,
Hmm.
and basically use it for retro games, emulation, stuff like that.
Hmm.
So I have spent quite a lot of time setting up Emulation Station, which is a really nice front end. Lets you kind of like automate a lot of the processes and automate a lot of the other emulators that these games use and stuff like that. Provides like information about the games and pictures and videos and stuff like that. Looks really, really nice.
Hmm.
So that is what I've been doing this past week, setting up that. And yeah, so by the time I get a new PC, I should have everything set up on this PC to be able to play kind of like thousands of games downstairs on the TV.
Yeah, Emulation Station is great. That's what I use on Steam Deck. Um, as it's included with a package that's designed for Steam Deck, but just you can obviously get it outside of that, and it is a fantastic front end. I love that you can uh, just at a glance see some details, get some you know critical information about the games without having to go all the way through the menus. Um, yeah, I love Emulation Station. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and obviously I'm going to keep stuff like Steam on there as well, so I can play like a whole bunch of games and that. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, that is just a future plan, which I thought was kind of relevant to the podcast, so I thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. It's you're basically doing something similar to what I'm eventually going to be doing with the Steam Deck once I get a big enough SD card.
I do have like a retro pie box as well, um,
Mhm.
but it's small and fiddly, and I'd rather just run it through a PC.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, if you've got an easier way to do it, then by all means. But yeah, that sounds great. I look forward to hearing about that when you've got it set up.
Yeah, should be sometime this summer. My plan is to get the new PC when the next Guild Wars 2 expansion comes out in the summer.
Mhm. See, normally that kind of news would make me panic and go, "Oh no, I need to go get caught up." But that's not how Guild Wars 2 works.
No.
But yeah, do we have any news really?
We do have kind of like I just wanted to bring up briefly. we've had a few new games added to the GOG preservation project.
Oh, right.
Um, the main one for me being Silent Hill 4,
Hmm.
which is exclusive to GOG on PC,
Hmm.
like digitally anyway. You can only buy it from them, and they've added a bunch of enhancements. There was a lot of content from the PS2 version that was actually missing in the PC version.
Hmm.
They've updated the game, added all that stuff back in, and yeah, their preservation project is doing some really good work. Like especially in the horror genre, like you've got Resident Evil 1, 2, 3 that's already in it. Um, and yeah, I think I'm sure I read that a bunch of the Ultima games were in there as well.
Hmm. I was just reading about it yesterday or the day before. Um, it sounded like really great. Like I saw a bunch of games I recognize in there. I already have a bunch of the games that are part of it in my library. So like this is very very cool and you know such a great thing for them to do.
Yeah, and they're essentially doing it because no one else will. Like the major
Yeah.
publishers don't give a shit.
Nope.
So it's falling to a third party company to kind of like patch these games up, make sure they work on modern systems, and
Hmm.
make sure they're like preserved in the best way they can be.
Yeah, because I mean, if it weren't for the fact that Blizzard sells digital copies of the original Diablo, that would be abandonware. Um, and truth be told, Blizzard probably wants people to forget about the expansion to Diablo, because like I saw that was in there. The whole Witcher series, well, the Witcher 1 and 2 were in there. Dragon Age Origins, Deus Ex, Fallout, and Fallout 2. You know, a lot of games that have notoriously struggled on modern hardware. Um, SimCity 2000, which was something I played on the PlayStation. Middle Earth Shadow of Mordor, which I thought was interesting. That, you know, I wouldn't think of that as a game that needs preservation, but then you remember that they've basically said they're not doing anything with the Nemesis system ever again, um, which is just a crime. But like, uh, stuff like Morrowind is in here, Jazz Jackrabbit, a kind of a platform shooter kind of thing. Um, the first three Resident Evils, I know those were in there.
Oh, Dino Crisis 1 and 2 as well.
Yes. Um, XCOM UFO Defense, a whole bunch of Lego games because, the Lego games have just been abandoned. Um, System Shock 2, which is another one that is, like foundational in a lot of modern video games that just nobody can was able to really play. Things like Populous, Riven. There's all kinds of like good and in many cases important games in here. Myst itself is in here. So there's Elder Scrolls 2, and like you said, most of the Ultima games. Uh, Starflight, which is a game that was kind of the precursor to Mass Effect. It wasn't made by BioWare or anything, but it was kind of the idea of Mass Effect, but on the Mega Drive, I believe. Yeah, I love the preservation project. I love what they're doing, and I'm glad somebody is because it needs to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioning Morrowind has just reminded me of something else as well. Um, this isn't technically news yet, but it will be shortly
Mm.
because apparently in April, Bethesda will be announcing a remaster of Oblivion. It's not confirmed yet, but sources have said that there will be a remaster announced in April, with the game coming out not that long after.
Mm-hmm.
So I am very excited for that because I love Oblivion.
Yeah, that's going to be something to watch out for. Um,
But they
'Cause,
haven't they haven't officially announced it yet, and we don't know exactly what form this remaster will take. Whether it will be fully redone or
Mhm.
because Oblivion works fine on PC
Mhm.
at the moment. So we will see what it holds.
Yeah, I mean, and Oblivion's a fantastic game. I would love to see it get a full ground up remake, but they they could just do the Skyrim thing and touch it up a little bit and put it back out. Um, I kind of feel like that would be, almost a disservice because you can still play the original version. Like I can boot up my Xbox copy right now and it's fine. Um, so I feel like,
Yeah, there's got to be something more to it.
right. I think the funniest thing they could possibly do is they release it and then they show a video of the V and the I switching places, and it's like surprise, this is Elder Scrolls 6.
Hmm. But on top of that, we should have Sky Oblivion coming out soon as well, which is a fan made project running in the Skyrim engine, which is actually a ground up remake of Oblivion because Bethesda wouldn't allow them to use any of the original game assets, so they've had to redo every texture, every voice line, everything.
And I don't know if it's the same group, but I believe there was also a Skywind in the works, which was
Yes,
essentially the same thing for Morrowind.
yeah, I think it's still early days on that at the moment, but Sky Oblivion has already taken like several years,
Mm-hmm.
but it is approaching a state where I think it's going to be releasable. They can't release it while they still have placeholder assets in there. They have
Right,
to replace everything,
right.
or Bethesda will come at them with legal action.
Yeah, because that's, they definitely will do that if they're given the chance.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, that's a lot of good stuff happening, um, in spite of the publishers in some cases, but we won't go down that rabbit hole. Um, Although people should go buy Dino Crisis. Those games are amazing.
Yes.
But yeah, if we don't have anything else, we can take a quick break and then get into the topic for the episode.
Okay.
All right, so longtime listeners will know that uh, on the Retro Odyssey we have some rules in place. We have qualifications for what we consider to be retro to qualify. Generally, it's 15 years, give or take, and then we have some other wonky qualifications. We also have a long-standing tradition that every April we say screw the rules and do some kind of new shenanigans. So, in the spirit of uh, that, April Fool's tradition, we're going to be talking about the Switch. Because let's face it, the Switch 2 is coming out. The Switch might as well be retro now.
It definitely is retro officially. Now that Switch 2 is on the way.
Which actually, uh, the Nintendo Direct for the Switch 2 might already be out by the time this airs. Uh,
Well, they are doing a Nintendo Direct this week, but they have said there will be no new Switch 2 info.
right, because there's a whole Switch to Direct uh, April 2nd. So, but by the time this comes out, dear listener, you may know more about the Switch 2 than we do. But regardless, uh, we're talking about Switch games, and I thought it was appropriate that we, in talking about Switch games, we talked about some tentpole Nintendo franchises. And the first one we're going to be talking about is Fire Emblem. The particular game is Fire Emblem Warriors Three Hopes, which is a mouthful and admittedly not the best name they could have given it. It's also entirely too similar to the most recent, the at the time most recent mainline Fire Emblem game, Fire Emblem Three Houses. So there's a whole lot of uh, confusion and nonsense there. But I guess it's somewhat appropriate because this game is basically a Fire Emblem Warriors game in the world of Three Houses. It follows a similar but alternate story, but that is just the tip of the iceberg. This game is I made the comment when we started playing these that this game is combining basically all of the Warriors games mechanics with all of the Fire Emblem mechanics. This may be one of the deepest Warriors games ever. Like there's a lot of there's a lot of traditional Fire Emblem mechanics like the weapon triangle and the support system. And then there's some things that just came up in more recent titles, and all of that is crammed into this game. And like, it's good, it's fun, I like it. There is a lot going on here,
Yes, it gets very complicated very fast.
and that's just the gameplay. The story is worse.
Well, the friend that I borrowed the game off said, in order to understand the story, you need to have played Three Houses.
Yes.
And yeah, because I didn't understand what was going on at all. You're
Yeah.
introduced to a whole bunch of characters. I don't know who these people are. I don't know anything about the world. It really drops you in at the deep end in terms of story. You are expected to know a hell of a lot that the game just will not tell you.
Yeah.
So I was lost.
And that is admittedly a shortcoming because um like fire the original Fire Emblem Warriors, it had this expectation that you were familiar with the series, but you didn't need in-depth knowledge of a particular entry. It was, oh hey, there's the characters from Fire Emblem Awakening. Oh, there's Ike from Path of Radiance. But this one is so heavily dependent on Three Houses, and I, full disclosure, haven't gotten all the way through Three Houses yet. I've only had a couple of opportunities to play it, but like I had enough context to know what was going on, but I do think that is a negative for this game that it is so heavily dependent.
Yeah, and it's surprising as well because the cutscenes are so long and they still don't fill you in on the stuff you need to know if you haven't played that game.
Yeah, and I mean that's a problem we deal with all the time. I mean, we're Final Fantasy fans. Long cutscenes are kind of our bread and butter. Um, but admittedly, these are not Final Fantasy level cutscenes.
No.
Um, But so yeah, the story is like I enjoy it, but that's because I have you know a long investment in the Fire Emblem series, and I know enough of what's going on. Um, but how did you feel about the game mechanically? I know, like we said, it gets complicated.
Well, I've never properly delved into a Warriors game before. I played a little bit of Hyrule Warriors in co-op,
Hmm.
but that's it. So I don't really know like how these games work and stuff like that. So I can't really compare it to other games and say that what I'm seeing is kind of like present in all Warriors games.
Hmm.
But there are you take two steps and there's another tutorial telling you about something else. And then there's another one. Then there's another one. Then there's another one. By the end of the time I stopped playing, which was kind of like a few hours in, I stopped reading the tutorials because it just adds so much stuff constantly, and you expected to remember all of this stuff. And my brain was just hurting from trying to remember all these different systems. So, in terms of kind of like new mechanics and stuff they're adding, I found it way too overcomplicated for the type of game that it is because it's essentially like a hack and slash.
Hmm.
I don't personally see why it needs to have 20 different systems in a game like this, and that got quite frustrating for me. Um, in terms of like the moment to moment gameplay, that was fine. I found the movement a little bit too floaty for my taste,
Hmm.
but the combat's decent. You can do combos on people and fill up gauges to do special attacks, stuff like that.
Hmm.
I wasn't too fond of the swapping characters mechanic because you can swap to any of the characters in your team at any point, and it leaves you feeling really disoriented when you actually swap to one because you're suddenly like obviously you're gonna be in like a completely different area, and it just you're just suddenly somewhere else, and I found it a little bit confusing to like get my head around, and you know just other people are probably used to that from other Warriors games, but for me that was kind of like quite new, and
Hmm.
the fact that generally speaking the NPCs will do fine on their own for the most part. I kind of just stuck to the one character just because that was easier. So like I have my main character, Shez,
Hmm.
at kind of like level 10 or 11 or something, and everyone else is like level 4 and 5
Hmm.
because she's leveling up because she's getting like most of the action, and depending on like each character's participation in the fight, you'll get more XP for that character. So I do have like one over leveled character. But the switching was so frustrating for me that that was the only way I could do it really.
Hmm. And that is something I noticed, that the character switch was so jarring, and sometimes it's like, wait, did I switch to the right character or not? And you have to take a second to look and see. And yeah, it's a hard cut, no transition, no preamble. It's just boom, you're somewhere else entirely. So yeah, I definitely uh I also felt a little disoriented a couple of times until I got used to it. I will say the floaty movement, that is a that's straight out of the Warriors games.
Right.
That is how pretty much all of them work. That's how Hyrule Warriors was. That's how Dynasty Warriors is. The the floaty movement is just part of the system. Um, but yeah, it's the thing about Fire Emblem is very complex, because it's a strategy RPG. Like, normal Fire Emblem, you're literally directing every movement that a unit makes in a battle. And they've simplified some of it because obviously you're not doing single attack on the enemies. It's more of the hack and slash style, but the number of mechanics they brought in, like I like having the weapon triangle. I think that adds a fun wrinkle to Warriors gameplay. I like the RPG elements because I'm an RPG fan and that can, shake things up a little bit. But, the pair up system is something that if you're not used to Fire Emblem, that's not going to make any sense.
I paired up with someone once in a fight and then completely forgot that it existed after that.
Yeah. And it's like it's a handy system if you're used to it. Um, the support system, if you're not used to Fire Emblem, you're not gonna know to keep two characters close together so that they get bonuses. And I speak partially from a place of ignorance. I have started the first Fire Emblem Warriors. I've never gotten very far into it, so maybe it was just as bad then, or maybe it flowed better in that game. I can't say for sure, but I felt like coming at it with a pretty good understanding of Fire Emblem and a base level understanding of Warriors games, I was prepared for what they were throwing at me. And as far as the tutorials, that fair dues, that is absolutely ridiculous. Like you'd be in the middle of a tutorial and then get another tutorial. Um,
You
but
can be in the middle of swinging a sword
yeah,
and get a tutorial. That's especially frustrating.
yeah, and it's nonsense. But the problem is, if you don't already know this stuff, you you know it's only going to hurt you to play without the tutorials. So that definitely could have been handled better. But the flip side of that is you get the people like me who, you know, a tutorial pops up is like, oh, this is the weapon triangle. I don't need to read this. I've already, I learned this, 10 years ago. So the mental load is much worse for people who don't have previous experience. And I mean, like, I like the game, but that is bad. You you know, it needs to be accessible to everyone.
Yeah, and like I said, I just stopped reading the tutorials in the end, just because I was getting so many.
Well, and if you only got a few hours in, then there's parts of it that uh you may not have even come across. Like I know you can still direct your units from the map screen. Um but like there's one as you get further in and you've got more people, it's like you can only control four, and then you have to, manually direct all the rest of them. And that, admittedly, I am not the norm. I'm fine with that, but that is not what someone looking for a hack and slash game wants to do.
Yeah, well, the orders system I actually found was one of the better mechanics because you can select any of your party members and say, right, I want you. It looks like you've got good combat proficiency against this guy. You go and deal with that, and you go and deal with that one.
Hmm.
While I just kind of like running around supporting where needed. So I did actually like that element of giving people different orders and having them complete objectives on their
And
own.
and like you said, the NPCs are actually pretty proficient, which is not always the case.
I mean, I am playing it on the easier difficulty as well. I don't know how that ramps up on harder ones.
I mean, I'm playing on normal or whatever the the equivalent would be, and um I'm trying to remember. 'Cause I think this also has the casual classic split from Fire Emblem, where casual your down troops come back at the end of a battle. Classic, they stay gone. Um,
Yeah, casual as well. Like the easy slash casual
mhm.
is a difficulty one.
Yeah, so I'm playing on classic, but like even then, the NPCs are they're still very good. Like I can yeah, like there's some NPCs that I'll have in the control slots that I don't need to bother controlling because I can just give them instructions the whole fight and they'll just tear through. So I that's one of the things I do really like is uh that the NPCs are competent and you can depend on them.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I didn't like so much is the map. It seems to me, even though there's kind of like a mini map in the top of the screen at all times, you can see kind of like passages that you can go down, and it seems kind of like maybe it's because the movement is so floaty. I'm going past the passages all the time, and it's kind of like I'm not turned in the direction that I thought I was turned in. So I
Hmm.
end up being turned completely around and missing passages. And especially like early on, you're going around like a castle, and that is so hard to navigate using that map
Hmm.
because there's so many of these passages, and you're moving so fast that you just end up completely turning around without even noticing.
Yeah, I had to start focusing to use the minimap because early on it was just you know using the menu map and just pausing every so often to check where I was, um, because it definitely can get confusing, especially I don't remember if the mini map spins, but I think it does, and that doesn't help.
The minimap did not spin for me. I don't know if that's an option.
It might be. I don't know. I've played like four games where it's either the map spins or it doesn't, and uh it always confuses me. But yeah, the mini map in this is not it's not as useful as it could be. It gives you enough, but again, you have to be used to it to really get much out of it.
And because each character is represented by like a pixel sprite, you can get confused about where people are. Like you look at that
Hmm.
minimap and you can't see at a glance which icon is which. You really do have to concentrate and say, okay, that's that character.
Hmm.
That's that character. I think rather than having little pixel art people, it would have been so much better if it was just a close up of their face.
Yeah, just a headshot.
Mm.
Yeah, and that I believe Three Houses does that as well for its map as kind of a throwback to the old Fire Emblems where they were just pixel art. But I definitely even as someone who's used to Fire Emblem and is used to identifying characters by that sprite art, some of those sprites are very similar, and it can be hard to tell who is who sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I was playing on like 42-inch TV, so I should be able to tell them apart at that kind of like size, but I just couldn't.
Right. So yeah, you know no judgment there. I also could see how that could be a problem. And I mean, I was going to mention this at the top, but I ended up playing both of these on the Switch Lite. Um, so I was predominantly playing these, handheld, you know, small screen in front of my face. Uh, so that probably also contributed to some of it. Is
Yeah, I started playing this in handheld mode, and I was like, this isn't going to work. So I connected up to my TV. I was also playing it with Joy Cons for the first few hours.
Mhm.
But because of my issues that I've been having with Joy-Con drift, that was really becoming a problem. So I actually ended up buying myself like a cheap Switch controller for like 15 quid. Um, mainly for this game. I mean, I've wanted one for a while, but I bought it because I was having issues with this game in
Mhm.
particular with the Joy-Cons. Um, so I played for a couple hours with the controller as well, and that was so much better.
I swear, I'm just gonna like box up some controllers and send them to you because I have way too many.
Well, this one's pretty solid. Like I say, it's cheap. It was only 15 quid, and it works perfectly
Mhm.
fine.
I mean,
It's actually designed for the Switch Lite, but it does work on other models as well.
yeah, I mean, Switch controllers are pretty universally compatible. So yeah, I'm glad you've got a good working controller now.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, like I could go on and on about this. Like, there's to to fully understand this game, you need to basically play it three times, once for each faction. Um, which is something we haven't even talked about is the three factions. Um, each who have their own set of troops, and each it's this whole story that changes based on who you're playing with.
I mean, I signed up with Edelgod's faction, um, the blonde lady.
Yep.
So I played through like quite a bit of hers. I didn't realize that the story was different if you choose someone else.
Yeah. It because I've actually I played a little bit of this previously on my Steam Deck, and I chose the Claude's group, the Golden Deer, I think, and that one, and that obviously plays out differently, um, because like in one particular battle, you're on the opposite side, and that just reminds me of another thing that they brought over from Fire Emblem is being able to recruit uh, enemy combatants, which I don't think that's in other Warriors games, but it's definitely a thing in Fire Emblem. So yeah, like you'll have people from the other houses that you can recruit through the course of your thing, but you see very different perspectives based on who you're playing as, or well, which group you're with, because obviously there's this whole conflict going on, and there's multiple sides of it.
Yeah, because like I find it quite humorous actually in one of the early matches that you play. You basically end up arresting the dads of the two other house leaders,
Hmm.
um, and they're like quite pissed off at you for it. So I'm assuming that plays out differently if you're playing as one of the others.
Yes.
Yeah, but I found that quite humorous. The dialogue in general is quite humorous. I don't know why I have a demon sidekick that only I can see.
I'll be honest. Um, like I think that's like a kind of a mirror thing to what Byleth has in Three Houses, because Byleth has this connection to this mystical figure in Three Houses, and I think Arvin is supposed to be like a counterpoint to that. Um, but he's just weird, and like the character interactions are those are coming straight from Fire Emblem. The usually humorous, sometimes they get serious. That's all pure Fire Emblem character interactions. Um, and the writing is usually pretty good. I mean, there's some characters that just fall flat in any Fire Emblem game, but that's one of the main draws of the series is the character interactions. So they do tend to do well with those. But yeah, the like I said, there's so much in here that especially someone like you who is relatively new to both Warriors and Fire Emblem, it's just way too much. And I actually appreciate that perspective because I'm coming in from the opposite side, and even I noticed some of these things. So the you know it's a good perspective to get in this case of if I was struggling at times, how bad was it for you?
I mean, with the other Warriors games, are the results screens so obnoxiously long?
No.
Because you've got to click through about 15 screens on at the end of every match to
Yeah.
kind of like see all the things you've got.
Those long end of battle screens, that is pure Fire Emblem.
Ah, fair enough. And the cutscenes as well, Jesus. It kind of suffers from the same Final Fantasy 14 patch problem where you'll get 5 minutes of gameplay and 20 minutes of cutscenes.
And 10 to 15 of those minutes are people standing around talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. It is a weakness, and it's something that the mainline Fire Emblems handled a lot better back in the 3DS era. I don't know for sure how prevalent it is in the Switch Fire Emblem games because I haven't gotten as far into them as I have on 3DS. But that dynamic of cutscene to gameplay was better handled in the 3DS Fire Emblems, and you wouldn't just have the people standing around talking. You would have you would have cutscenes that were an actual fight between two characters, and those were the well animated, high quality cutscenes. And then the standing around talking would be the in engine, you know, little models.
Yeah, I mean, in defense of Final Fantasy 14, like at least their cutscenes have things happening in them,
Right.
even if they are sometimes obnoxiously long.
Yeah, and that's that is that again, that was something I noticed here is a lot of standing around and talking. And maybe the I noticed the contrast more because I also played a little bit of Fire Emblem Awakening while I was playing this. And Fire Emblem Awakening is widely regarded as one of the best in the series because it handled it was basically like the renaissance of Fire Emblem. It kind of brought the series back from the brink because the characters were so good, the gameplay was good. Like, I wonder if I was noticing some of these things more because I was playing a better example of Fire Emblem at the time. But yeah, I mean, we could keep going down this rabbit hole, but I think we've pretty much got the gist of it.
There is one more quick thing I wanted to bring up. You have when two characters are talking, you have like the talking heads thing in the corner, as well as them being on the screen as well. Which is odd.
Yeah.
Which is odd. But one thing I noticed is that Shez's hair is a different color in the game than it is in her character portrait. It is blue in the game, and it is purple in a character portrait.
Mm-hmm.
That is odd.
That I think that's just an error,
Mm.
because like in all of the artwork I've seen, it's purple. In Fire Emblem Heroes, it's purple. Um, Now the talking heads text box with them also being on screen, that's pure Fire Emblem, and that's a carryover from the days when there wasn't, as much voice acting, because this game used to be only text boxes, and you know, by God, they hung on to the text boxes.
Mm.
But yeah, we can go on, but I think we've got the gist of it, and I know that uh, both of us have a lot to say about our other game. So let's take a quick break, get a drink, and prepare ourselves, because this next one is probably going to be long. All right, so the other game that we're going to be talking about is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is a game that both of us had already played. In fact, I think all four of us from the original podcast played it when it came out. I mean, just in terms of, casual discussion amongst friends, we've talked about this game a bunch. Um, and part of the reason it's going second is because I think we'll have more to say about this one, because this is, you know,
It's a remarkable game. Let's just get that out of the way.
yeah, it's at the top. This is one of the best games that I own.
It's
And
definitely the best game I own on Switch. Yeah, I mean, I would even put it above Mario Kart 8, which is high praise because I fucking love Mario Kart 8.
yeah, it's a very good one. Um, and I love the Zelda series. I opened this podcast 7 years ago talking about my favorite game of all time, and it was a Zelda game. Um, so this game was a big deal for me at the time. It's still kind of a big deal for me, and that's why when we were preparing for this episode, I played through the whole game again on a new save file, and also played through um, a a big enough chunk of the DLC to unlock certain things. I didn't do the other big part of the DLC because I still haven't done that on my main file. But yeah, I played through this entire game on the Switch Lite, and number one, like a lot of people said when this game came out, that it yes, it was good, but did it hold up on a second play? I thought it absolutely did, and it didn't feel bad to play on the Switch Lite at all.
Yeah, so when I was playing the original game, I did do a lot of it handheld,
Mm-hmm.
um, and a lot of it on TV as well. I kind of like switch back and forth. It is perfectly fine in handheld.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything, you've got big chunky icons. You can see everything perfectly fine in handheld. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and with it being a Switch launch game, they obviously had that in mind. They wanted to make sure it looked good on both TV and handheld.
Mm-hmm. And that's the craziest thing is so many people forget this game also came out on the Wii U, because it was originally supposed to be a Wii U exclusive.
Yeah, because we did have a discussion when we were deciding games for this episode. We wanted specifically Switch games, but we felt that because it did come out simultaneously rather than coming out on the Wii U first, that this counted as a Switch game that we could talk about.
Yes, because Mario Kart 8 was one of the ones we discussed, but it was a Wii U game that was then remastered for Switch. And we felt this was a more, I don't want to say like more of a true Switch game, but its original release was also on Switch. And I mean, I would say this is one of, if not the most important Switch releases, of the console's lifespan. Like this launched day one with the Switch, and I think this game was a big reason for why the Switch took off so much in that first year, even with not as many games coming out that first year.
Yeah, and I mean the Switch did have some fantastic stuff coming out the first year. Like I say, you got the Mario Kart 8 port, you got Pokemon Let's Go, Super
Mario
Mario
Odyssey.
Odyssey, which came out towards the end of the year, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, this is kind of like I said, launch game as well.
Mm-hmm.
It still hasn't really been topped, at least for me.
Yeah, and I think it's telling that there was a point in 2017 where sales of Zelda Breath of the Wild on Switch had outstripped Switch sales
How did why?
because people there were so many problems getting the Switch early
Oh
on.
right, yeah.
So there were so many supply issues, but people were still buying this game because their friends were telling them you have to get this game. I don't think it's hyperbolic to say this is one of the best games out there, and arguably, I would say one of the most important games, particularly for the Switch.
Yeah, absolutely. It did a good job as well of highlighting a lot of the features that the Switch has. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it had the gyroscope stuff in it
Yes.
if you want to use it. That you could kind of like aim with and stuff like that. So it did a good job of like showing off stuff like that that the Switch could do.
And also the puzzles using the gyroscope. Um, Although some of those were a little more than would be ideal, but it also did a great job of highlighting Amiibo because they were still doing Amiibo back then. Um, but like basically any Legend of Zelda Amiibo, you could scan and get a whole bunch of stuff, and you could scan other Amiibos as well. But you really wanted to scan the Zelda Amiibos because you would get, like for example, if you scanned a Wind Waker Link or Toon Link from Smash Brothers, you would get a whole bunch of fish and then a treasure chest, and that chest would have either arrows or something useful in it, or a piece of that Link's outfit, because you could get the hat, tunic, and pants from any of those Link amiibos, and that was a cool thing. But I think the coolest thing they did was there was a Twilight Princess amiibo that was Wolf Link with Midna riding it. And if you scan that amiibo, you could have Wolf Link running around with you in game.
Yeah, I think there was some controversy around that because it does give you kind of like an in-game advantage if you do have that. And prices of that particular amiibo shot up because of that.
Yeah. And admittedly, I don't think it's much of an advantage because he can only take so many hits and then he's gone for an entire day. But obviously if you max him out, then he, is practically unkillable. But it was a very cool thing that they did. Um, I mean, it was never going to save Amiibo because Nintendo was just not going to support that the way they should have. But I did enjoy that. But honestly, this is like Zelda games are always pretty well received. This one was like, I mean, people were fanatical about this. Like it it came within like half a point of dethroning Ocarina of Time for the highest rated game of all time.
It's better than Ocarina of Time.
Oh, for sure. Ocarina of Time is vastly overrated, as we've already discussed in a previous episode. Um, but this game was just fantastic, and I really liked. Zelda games usually have a story emphasis, but that story emphasis ends up taking a huge backseat to the gameplay because there's so much more of the gameplay. In this, that was kind of both better and worse than in other versions because you there is a whole lot more gameplay than there is story cutscenes, but there's a lot of little reminders of the story throughout the world. I mean, every time you come across a destroyed outpost or a town that's uh barely surviving, it's a reminder of the overarching narrative and what's going on in the game, and I really like that.
Yeah, and that narrative is especially dark for
Yeah,
for a Zelda game.
yeah, like this is post-apocalyptic Zelda, and like it's especially early on. Like you do the first bit on the Great Plateau, and there's nobody around except for the old guy, and then you go out into the world, and even for that first little bit, you only see like one or two people until you find like an actual town. Like it starts out, you know, laying it heavy on how dark it is and how devastated this world is. Now, as as the world opens up and as you discover more, you see that it's, this isn't Fallout, but it still is a world recovering from a calamity.
Yeah, and like for Link personally, it's especially dark because, as the king tells you near the start, all your friends are dead. Your girlfriend, who was a fish, she's dead.
Mm-hmm.
Deal with it. Defeat Ganon.
Yeah,
Otherwise, Zelda will die.
yeah, and that, you know, I like there's people have criticized the story. I think the story is fantastic. They tried something new, and I've said many, many times on this podcast, I appreciate when people try new things.
Yeah, the story here is simple, but it's effective. There's no kind of like massive political machinations going on. There's no kind of like rallying together of everyone to kind of like defeat Ganon, and the objective is when you finish all the stuff in the Great Plateau, which is probably like the first hour or so of the game, your objective just changes to defeat Ganon. And how you choose to do that and when you choose to do that is up to you. Now, there is obviously side quest story there, like if you want it, but the bare bones is Zelda is holding back Ganon. Stop him. And that is kind of like the main drive of the story. It doesn't get a lot more complicated than that. and I found that quite refreshing. And like you said, the story that is there is still decent, but it doesn't overcomplicate things with like a lot of side stuff unless you want it to.
Right. And that was the biggest thing with this game. It was the freedom to choose. Once you get the defeat Ganon quest, you can go straight to the castle and take him on. It's not advisable. You get way stronger by going and doing stuff, but you can. And the thing that I liked so much as a longtime fan of Zelda is this game, it broke from tradition in a lot of ways because the ever since Ocarina of Time and even a little bit before that, there was this intended path for the game, and you basically could not stray from that path. Whereas here, you could go anywhere at any point, and that was it was a something new, but it was also a throwback to the original Legend of Zelda, where you were just dropped into a world and it's like, oh, there's a cave on screen. Let me go into the cave. Here's a sword. Go nuts. And this game was very reminiscent of that original Zelda while still having some guidance of what to do, but the spirit of, you know, go find stuff and you choose where you go and what you find was very reminiscent of the original Zelda, and I really liked that.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about the opening briefly as well.
Mm-hmm.
I wish the opening section where you start off in a shrine, I wish that was longer
Mm-hmm.
because the game has an Oblivion moment where you exit this dark cave and the world just opens out in a burst of color in front of you. And it's really, really beautiful to look at. I think if you'd have had a few more minutes in that cave, that would have had a bit more impact.
That's a
It
good
does
point.
it does still have like a massive impact, but you only spend like 2 minutes in that cave.
Yeah.
If you had had like a whole mini quest there, like say nothing major, just say 10-15 minutes in that cave and then came out into the world,
Mm-hmm.
that would have been like a revelation kind of the same way that Oblivion did it.
Mm-hmm. That would have made the I don't think you get the world is destroyed concept until after you finish the Great Plateau. Um, like maybe if there had been something in there to explain what had happened, and it's like, oh, the world was basically destroyed. Everybody failed. They tell you that in the shrine, and then you come out and see a world that's still living and thriving. That
Yeah,
that that would have been a very very impactful moment.
yeah. It is still really impactful. Like I remember my very first time playing this. When I first got it, I stood at the top of that mountain for a couple of minutes taking screenshots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's. I mean, obviously they went into this. Well, okay, they went into this expecting to just make the next Zelda, and then 5 years later it finally released. But when they switched this over to being a Switch exclusive, they knew they had to, or a Switch launch title rather. They knew they had to step it up, and I think this is another one of those games, just like Wind Waker, where art direction makes more of a difference than graphical fidelity.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it has a very cell shaded look to it that absolutely works for the game.
Yeah, like the art style here does far more to make the game look good than just, good graphics. This game in terms of graphical fidelity is way behind, other games of the time, but this game looks better than a lot of those because graphical fidelity is not as important as art direction. And like this is all just surface level stuff. Like, you know, obviously there's the master sword that you can find. There's a whole quest for that. There's you can snowboard on your shield. There's all kinds of fun stuff to find. There's, all these shrines, and once you find all of the shrines, you go to this big shrine and get the traditional green tunic.
I never actually got all the shrines, so I never got that myself.
I did that on my original playthrough on my launch day Switch. I did not get all of them on this most recent one because I just didn't want to go through that much effort for a replay that wasn't going to be 100%. Um, but I mean, you've got the runes that give you all different ways to interact with the world. There's even little things like uh, when you're in a thunderstorm, if you're wearing metal weapons, they'll attract lightning.
Yeah,
Things like that. The one I'm angry about is the fact that you pretty much can't climb while it's raining.
in the rain. Yeah, that was not a good decision.
But the fact that you can climb pretty much anywhere was fantastic. I spent like when I play this game, I always have that climber's bandana on because I spend so much of my time climbing.
Yeah, I think in my other playthrough, I mostly had stuff like that on as well.
Mhm.
But like this time around, I started from the start again. I did I did load up one of my old saves, but because it's been 8 years, I was just lost. So I decided, you know what, we'll go back to the start, do it all again. I went through everything in the Great Plateau. Um, and so I was like reintroduced to a lot of those mechanics. Um, one thing, one thing that kind of struck me is how simple a solution to a problem can be, because there is an area in the Great Plateau which is covered in ice, and if you walk too long in that area, the ice will start to kill you. So I'm looking at ways of kind of like trying to stave off the ice and keep myself warm. And the simple solution was just light a torch and carry it with you. Just it's that simple.
Yeah.
Carry a torch with you. There are about 3 or 4 ways you can approach that problem, but it can be just as simple as that. Or there's a side quest that you can do to get a warm doublet,
Yeah.
which you get it for free later on anyway. But you can do that, or you can cook food which keeps you warm.
Mhm.
But the simplest solution, light a torch.
Yeah. And I love that, you have that very basic puzzle there, and then because of the impact it makes, you then remember that later on. So when you're getting to much colder areas and you're having to combine multiple methods, you remember these. So like a lot of times when I'm up in some of the colder areas, I'll have a fire sword on me because raises that raises your body temperature automatically. So
Yeah, and like I
yeah,
said, you've got the food as well, so you can combine all these things together.
mhm. The level of interactivity with everything and the amount of choice is really what makes this game stand out, and it's why you know I my first playthrough of this game was all about discovery. It was all about going through this world and finding things and oh, I didn't know this was here, and like, oh, this is a thing from one of the other games. Um, but it still holds up on a second playthrough because even if that initial sense of discovery isn't there, like, if you go in knowing about the world, you can still have some of that wonder from finding things or from solving a puzzle. And just the way you interact with the world is enjoyable, and that isn't diminished by a second play.
No, absolutely not, because the freedom is there to tackle things in so many different ways, like the runes that you mentioned, which allow you to kind of like traverse a lot of puzzles. They're
Hmm.
all usable in combat,
Hmm.
and you can come up with crazy shit if you kind of like see if there's a big boulder there and there's enemies below, you can freeze the boulder, swing at it to kind of like load up kinetic energy, and have that kind of like pile drive the enemies away. Or you can
Yep.
freeze the enemies and take them out from far, or throw a bomb at them.
Yep.
There's so many different ways that you can kind of like approach the world with with these runes and the other mechanics as well. Um, so that there's an approach for everything.
Yeah. And there's multiple different ways to handle things. You can uh you'll have like a little camp of bokoblins, and you can either sneak around the outside and pick them off one by one, or you can just go in swinging. And some things work better than others, but you have the freedom to try just about anything, which leads to some of the crazy videos that came out over the last 8 years of people doing all kind of crazy shenanigans both in and out of combat.
Yeah, some people have set up kind of like these elaborate Gold Mug machines to defeat some enemies that I've seen.
Mm.
There's some crazy combinations you can do.
Yeah. I remember, I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember seeing one where they took out a Lionel in a really creative way. But the one that sticks out the most to me is someone who figured out how to fly, because you've got the magnesis one where you can control things that are metal, but if you're standing on the thing, you can't move it around. But what they did was they took like these two minecart things from the Goron area, stacked them on top each other, and then controlled the bottom one, and they were able to basically just fly around. Like that sheer level of let's try this, and being able to have something happen.
Yeah, it's just a massive sandbox.
And it's a sandbox where you're not just looking for icons on a map, because that's, as much as I love the Assassin's Creed games, those games in many entries had a massive problem of just ticking things off of a map, whereas this game, you know it's not it's not the things on the map that that make it enjoyable. It's the world those things are in
Yeah.
that makes it enjoyable. And a lot of people have issues with this game because of the weapon durability system.
Yeah, I'm one of them.
I personally am okay with it, but I understand that perspective.
Like with some of the less powerful weapons, some of them take like four or five hits and they're gone.
Yeah.
What I would have liked to have seen is if one of your weapons breaks, it immediately equips you with another one. Because you can be in the middle of combat, in the middle of a lot of enemies, and that will break.
Hmm.
And you've then got to like pause to equip another weapon before you can like continue attacking.
Yep.
So I wish there was like an auto equip for another weapon.
Yeah, that is definitely one of the weak points of it. I've found that the weapon durability is mostly a problem in the early game, because once you get far enough and you start finding some of these better weapons, it's less of an issue. It also helps that some of the weapons, like the special weapons you get from the various temples, well, after beating the temples, you can have those remade when they break, which is nice, but again, you still have to go out and find the weapon to turn into that.
Yeah, I wish those special weapons had a rechargeability like the Master Sword does.
Hmm.
And comparing it back to Oblivion as well, when you have like an enchanted weapon that has a charge on it,
Hmm.
and it doesn't break the weapon when that charge is gone, you can just recharge it again.
Yeah.
And I wish it was more like that.
Yeah, I feel like even though I'm okay with the system, I feel like there should have been more of a middle ground for people that don't like weapon durability, which the Master Sword kind of is, but once it runs out of energy, you have to wait 10 minutes for it to be usable again. So it effectively is still breaking. Like you still don't have access to it for 10 minutes.
Yeah, there were points exploring the castle later on, um, when I would use the Master Sword until it ran out, and
Mhm.
then I would find a safe spot and go do something else for a bit,
Yep.
and then come back to it.
Now, one of the things that one of the things that I loved about the Master Sword in this game is they they found a way to doubly reinforce the idea that this is the sword of evil's bane, because any monster that is directly connected to Ganon, it gets a power up. So any of the bosses of the four temples, it gets a power up, and I believe some of the guardians, it also gets a power up. And then obviously for the Ganon fight, it gets the power up. But it reinforced the idea that this sword is special and this sword is especially effective against these enemies. And that is something that other games in the series have not done nearly as well.
Yeah, add to that the fact that it's difficult to get as well. It it
Yes.
it, it adds to that kind of like legend of it.
And I feel like this game does a better job of that than say Skyward Sword, where in Skyward Sword you are building the Master Sword. Like you go through the temples and you're getting more and more of the sword's power together. But this one, it's this is already established. You have to prove that you deserve to wield the sword again,
Yeah.
and it becomes both a gameplay and character moment where you're trying to get the sword and you either can or can't. And like I don't know if you tried to pull the sword before you were ready more than once, but the great Deku tree that's sitting there, the first time you try to pull the sword and you don't have enough hearts, he will stop you before you die. But he says, "I won't stop you again."
Mm.
And he doesn't. If you go back and try to pull the sword without enough hearts and you let the hearts get all the way down, you will just die. This is why this game is so beloved. It is, so well done because not only did they do a good job in the big ideas, the overarching, concept and mechanics of the game, but they put so much attention on little details. You know, the Koroks, both the ones out in the world that you find and the ones in the forest, each one of them has a different mask and they have a different personality and like the little details are what elevate this game to that, best of all time level.
So, speaking of the Koroks, you did mention earlier on about with the Assassin's Creed games, you do end up ticking things off a box. There
Yeah.
are something like, I think it's something stupid like 800 Koroks that you can find out
Uh
in the world.
there's at least 900.
Oh shit! Yeah, and that to me is an example of busy work. I don't really go around looking for these Koroks anymore. After I had done a certain amount, I was like, I'm done searching for these.
Hmm. Yeah, well, so that I am fully convinced that the sheer extent of those was a joke on the part of the developers. Um, so for anyone who's not aware, throughout the world you'll have these little mini puzzles. Like you'll see a stack of metal boxes, and then a stack of metal boxes next to it that is almost but not exactly the same, with a box off to the side that you can move and then put to be the same. And then it'll lock into place, and the little Korok pops out and goes, "Yaha!" And he gives you a Korok seed. And like Matt said, there are at least 900 of these things. You can only use, I think, like five or 600. Like at a certain point, you can't do anything else with them. But if you get all of them and turn them in, you get a golden poop. I am fully convinced that the sheer excessiveness of the Koroks was a joke on the part of the developers. Like, I'll fully admit, I haven't gone and gotten them all because that's just ridiculous.
I have seen people do it. People have dedicated entire streams to
Mhm.
getting every single one.
Oh, yeah, so there are exactly 900 Korok seeds. And yeah, so the item you get is Hestu's gift, a gift of friendship given to you by Hestu. It smells pretty bad and it looks like a little golden poop. So yeah, I like it was a fun little thing to put in, and I think at a certain point they either realized they had way more than they needed or they deliberately put in way more than they needed and decided to put something funny at the end of it.
Mm.
But that's one of the ways that this game deviates hard from the traditional Zelda formula. Even deviating from the original Zelda because the dungeons are so different in this game. Whereas in most of the other games you'll have the major dungeons, but there'll be like, seven or eight, or I think Twilight Princess has like 13 dungeons. Um, there's a long list of dungeons in the game, and each dungeon will have multiple, you know, multiple rooms that are either combat puzzles or block moving puzzles or whatever. Like you're solving puzzles the whole way. What this game did was it had the four major dungeons plus Hyrule Castle, and the rest of those dungeon puzzles were spread out among the shrines. And those shrines would test either your combat or your ability with the runes or just your critical thinking in some cases. And I liked that, but a lot of people didn't like the lack of traditional dungeons.
I was fine with it. The shrines, after a point, started to get tedious
Yes.
because there is a lot of them, and you do get useful things from them, but some of them are really quite difficult and really quite taxing. And when you have so many of them and you're doing them like one after the other, stuff like that, yeah, it gets a bit exhausting.
Yeah. And that, that is a whole thing is, there's 120 shrines, and yes, there's an actual, useful thing at the end of it, but there's 120 shrines. And that's before the DLC. There's extra shrines in the DLC. So, like, I definitely get that where it can get tedious, especially, depending on what kind of shrines you're finding. Because if you're getting, three of the hard combat shrines in a row, that's going to wear on you.
Am I right in thinking though? I believe the it's been a long time since I played that far into the game, but weren't the combat shrines a different color?
No.
No. Ah,
So what they would do is when you first find the shrine, well, so when you the shrines are orange normally, and then when you first find them and approach them, parts of it turn blue, but the rest of it stays orange, and then they turn blue once you've completed them.
right.
But yeah, just from the outside, you can't tell what kind of shrine it's going to be unless it's one of the special ones from the DLC. Um, but yeah, they definitely can wear on you, especially like I mentioned earlier, if you're not a fan of motion controls and gyroscope, some of those gyroscope puzzles are not fun.
Yeah, I remember not liking the gyroscope ones.
Mhm. I like it, but it's another thing where I acknowledge that I am not the norm, and there are some, there is some pushback on that. But I think all of the you know for all of the things we can criticize about this game, the the overall impact is just overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, the criticisms I have are more nitpicks, really.
Hmm.
I still I got this game day it came out, and
Yeah.
I just I just loved it from start to finish.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I got this day one, um, played it for a good chunk of 2017, and I could not get enough. It was fantastic. And then going back even all these years later, knowing all the stuff about the game, it still hits. It's still that much fun to play. And yes, some things are easier on a second play. It's when you kind of know where some things are, some things do get easier. But you still have there are still some things that you have to go find. There are still some things that uh will have the impact no matter how you're coming at them. Like, one of my favorite things about this game is the characters. And that is an unusual thing for a Zelda game because Zelda games traditionally have not like they've had memorable characters, but a lot of times the more memorable characters are in the weirder games. So like Link's Awakening, Wind Waker, Majora's Mask. There's some very memorable characters and interactions in those games, but those are not the prototypical Zeldas. Um, but the interactions between the champions, the interactions between Zelda and the champions, the interactions between Zelda and Link, I think all of that was very well done. And it's once again, it's an optional part of the game. You don't have to engage with it if you don't want to, but going through all these memories that you find and learning the story of what happened 100 years ago and seeing Zelda's journey, I feel like that, you know, the impact of that is not lessened by knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah, it has a hell of a lot of heart, and a lot of that stems from those flashback cutscenes,
Mm-hmm.
which I found were kind of like beautifully done, and like Link's moments with that Zora girl. The game doesn't explicitly say that they're dating, but you can kind of tell they are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and seeing these cutscenes, knowing that she doesn't make it, is kind of it has like this extra layer, and it's beautiful and kind of like heartbreaking at the same time. And the stuff with Zelda as well, like you said, there was a particularly memorable scene where he kind of like defends her from some monsters. They they are just so well done. The voice acting in them is great,
Mm-hmm.
um, and they just have a lot of heart and bring kind of like a lot of character to the characters.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think it does really shine in that area.
Yeah, and that, you know, that I want to say this was the first Zelda game that had this level of voice acting. Um, Most of it from the N64 on was like the little blip 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 kind of uh noises, but not actual voice acting. Um, but they made the most out of the voice acting on this one to the point where like some of these characters are extremely memorable. Um, and yes, some are better than others, but like there's characters in this that have massive fan bases, and they're a background character in the story.
I remember like gushing over Sidon the first time I saw him.
Yeah, Sidon is a big one. Urbosa is one. I'm particularly fond of Mifa, and just like these characters were brought to life so well, and it's it's a combination of you know the writers, the voice actors, the animators. It all just came together so well, and especially watching Zelda's journey of trying to trying to be the you know the princess that saves everyone and trying to gain this power and failing and then finally unlocking it when basically when all hope is lost, Link is on the ground almost dead.
That brought a tear to my eye. That when
Yeah,
when when she did that.
yeah, like it's fantastic.
Like I said, definitely the best game that I have for the Switch. And nothing I've really played since has topped it. And even though I've not played a hell of a lot of Zelda games, this is easily the best of the ones I've played, and it's not even close, to be honest. This is kind of like miles above. Now, I haven't played Tears of the Kingdom, so I don't know what kind of impact that would have. Whether that's kind of like more of the same thing, but I honestly can't see it topping this.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same. I like I said, I've got access to Tears of the Kingdom now, but I haven't played it yet. I don't know. I know there's a lot more of like building stuff in that. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be on the same level as Breath of the Wild. I mean, like I said, I started this podcast talking, gushing about Link to the Past as my favorite game, and I think Breath of the Wild does surpass Link to the Past as my favorite Zelda game.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of, you know, my favorite Switch game or favorite game of all time, then we have to talk about Pokemon Legends Arceus. But that even that game was heavily inspired by Breath of the Wild. And that's the other thing, what I mentioned back at the beginning is this game has had such an impact. A whole bunch of games after this tried to do a similar formula and a similar style of game, and I don't think any of them even got close, with the possible exception of the Pokemon one. And even that, it only has that level of impact if you're that into Pokemon.
Yeah.
So yeah, long story short, too late. This game is incredible. If you haven't played this game, you absolutely should.
And I would have kept playing it back in 2017. Like I've told this story on the podcast before, but it's an appropriate place to tell it again. Basically, I did want to kind of like 100% complete everything apart from the core axes because I'm not mad.
Right.
But that was the plan until I was exploring the castle and accidentally walked into Ganon's room, and I ended up like one-shotting him. So I didn't like go back after that. Sometimes with games like that, where there is kind of like a definitive ending, it is difficult to bring yourself to go back to it once you've actually completed it.
Mm-hmm.
So I never ended up going back until literally playing it for this. But with me having started playing it again, I may this time go and try for that 100% without accidentally walking in on Ganon this time.
Mm-hmm. And now there's the DLC, which adds on a few things. My favorite thing the DLC adds on is the four dungeons are these divine beasts. The DLC adds a fifth one that is Link's, and it's a motorcycle. It's called the Master Cycle, and that's just so much fun to run around on.
The I don't know if you played the Link DLC in Mario Kart 8.
Yeah, it's in there.
He does, yeah, he does have a motorcycle in that.
The Master Cycle is in that. That's part of the Champions Ballad DLC, which is this big extra story dealing with the champions and finding out more about each of them. And then the other part that I haven't completed is the an extra trial with the Master Sword, where basically you go back and put it back in the pedestal, and you do this big, multi-level dungeon where you start with nothing It's like there's one particular shrine like this where you land on an island and start with nothing and have to work your way back up to where you were. This is like that, but so much deeper. It's huge. You have to go through like I think like 100 levels, um, starting from nothing, just as skivvies.
Yeah, out of all the DLC, that is the only one that I've actually attempted, um, and I found it a bit too frustrating for me.
Yep, that's
I've
why I
not.
haven't finished it.
Yeah, I do have all of the DLC, but I've not really kind of like gone into it apart from spending a little bit of time in that one.
Yeah, I can recommend the Champions Ballad, both for the additional character work and for the motorcycle because it's just fun. Um, but then I still need to get through the Trial of the Sword because the thing is tough.
Hmm.
But yeah, so you know, to prevent this from being a 4 hour episode, I think we should go ahead and cut ourselves off.
Yeah, like we could go on for another hour about this game easily, I think.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, we won't.
yeah, because like I said, there's so much to talk about and so much for so many stories that we personally have with it, and this is all you know this is all kind of talking around most of the experience of the game. Like, it's kind of hard to spoil this because the story is you go fight Ganon. Um, it's every most of the stuff we talked about is everything around the core of go stab the giant pig.
Hmm.
Um, Now I will say they released a second Hyrule Warriors that was it's I know it's officially a spin-off of this game. I'm trying to remember if it's a prequel or not. Um,
I believe it was. I believe it was set 100 years in the past, if I'm not mistaken.
yes, and actually I think so. I think it's effectively a prequel to Breath of the Wild and a sequel to the original Hyrule Warriors. But yeah, so that's a fun thing that I also have access to and plan on playing at some point. But yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and stop ourselves here, take a quick break, and then come back and finish up.
Okay.
Well, excuse me, princess.
All right, so that is our long and meandering take on Switch games. I know I'm just kind of still a little bit in awe that we've been doing this for 7 years.
Yeah. We forgot to mention earlier. It is actually the 7 year anniversary this month
Mm.
of the podcast. This is the 60th episode that we've done as well, which is a pretty big number.
Yeah. And even through all the uh all the difficulties we've encountered and all having to uh cut down our numbers, we've kept going, and we have no plan to stop anytime soon.
There's still a hell of a lot more games to talk about.
Yeah, so uh we will be continuing. It just felt a little bit appropriate to take a moment and reflect on the fact that we've been doing this for 7 years. And you know what? We've gotten a lot of good out of it. Like, you've both actually you and I both have discovered series that we didn't know we loved as much as we would.
Yeah, and they're even some of my favorite games of all time now that I wouldn't have played without this podcast, like Symphony of the Night.
Yeah, Symphony of the Night is a big one. For me, the Metroid series, I had never played Metroid before now, and now I'm obsessed. So, yeah, this is a big deal, and it's been a lot of fun, and we're gonna keep going for as long as we can manage.
Yeah, so we will be back hopefully in a couple months. We don't know what the theme of that is going to be, but I'm sure it'll be something fun.
Yeah. So,
or at least something that we can get a good few rants out of.
yeah, that's also a good point. So, we will be back. Until then, we'll just say goodbye and thank you for listening for 7 years.
Yes, thank you very much. And goodbye.
Bye.